Today I have Professor Marva Johnson, Professor of Political Science, who will be speaking with us today about her time here at Texas Southern and her work with the School of Public Affairs. And I'll have Professor Johnson to walk us through what brought her to Texas Southern and the early years of being here at TSU within the School of Public Affairs and some of the activities that went on.
Okay, as you've been told, my name is Marva Johnson. I'm a undergraduate of Tougaloo College in Tougaloo, Mississippi, and did my graduate work at Atlanta University. It was then Atlanta University. For some time now, it's been Clark Atlanta University. And I studied with Professor Mac Jones at a time when he was trying to get a political science program started, graduate program, doctoral studies with an emphasis on the Black experience. And I had the first department chair that I worked with was Mr. Shelley Jarman. And what Professor Jarman had wanted was to bring someone to the university who could help us out in that area. It was a time of change. The older faculty were retiring and they needed to bring some new people in. So when I first came, I came basically to teach undergraduate American government and Texas government classes. And then from there, there were also a few upper level classes that I was asked to teach. So over time, what happened was in the process of building the department, Professor Jarman was looking at some of the courses that needed to be taught. And so I developed courses like urban politics. I developed a course on civil rights course. It didn't all happen during his tenure, but over time I developed like 6 classes. Urban politics, women's politics, introduction to political science, and other courses that have become standard as a part of our courses that we teach our students. In the 70s, we were located in Hannah Hall. And when we were located in Hannah Hall, in the earliest days, we were called the government department. And eventually, a professor named Tandy Tollison was brought in. And when Dr. Tollison came, he decided that we might think about changing the name of the department. So eventually we changed it to political science. And it was a time of growth. We were really kind of crowded because at that time we were located we shared space with the law school. And when we shared space with the law school, I liked that because there was a lot of community. By us being political science, they would just come out of class and come over and tell us what was going on. So we knew everything from what happened in class that day to who had a raggedy car. We just knew all kinds of things. And it was a very, very lively environment at that time. And while we were located in Hannah Hall, we also had interaction with people from sociology, economics, history, and you combine that with political science in the law school, and you can see that it was pretty lively in there, psychology and so forth. Eventually, decisions were made that we should have public affairs, and that's when we moved into the era when Dr. McCoy came in, Dr. Walter McCoy, who was the founding dean of the School of Public Affairs. And when that happened, we experienced, obviously we experienced growth because new programs were put in place. And we began to think about not only the master's in public administration, but also a master's in political science. But that didn't turn out. But in the end, many of our students stayed with us. They studied political science, and then they went on to study the for the Masters in Public Administration. We had Health Administration and some other programs. And after, I don't know how long, but after a period of time passed, there was a change in leadership, and Dr. Anderson came to head up the School of Public Affairs. Dr. Anderson's tenure was not very long, but it was basically, we were doing the same kinds of things, you know, the same classes, same programs and all that. Eventually, the administration made a decision to collapse the School of Public Affairs into a Department of Public Affairs. And for quite a long time, Dr. Theophilus Harrington was the head over the Department of Public Affairs. Now, essentially what happened was that all of those programs, graduate, undergraduate, all of those programs were brought together, but just under, we remained together, but just under the heading of Department of Public Affairs as opposed to School of Public Affairs. Sometime later, a decision was made that we should be merged in with the School of Business. It was not a happy relationship, and it didn't last. But that was a time of reorganization. For instance, I think home economics was put into the School of Technology or something like that. We had all kinds of things going on. Eventually, we were brought back into the what used to be for a long time called Arts and Sciences. And then from Arts and Sciences, the name was changed to Liberal Arts and Behavioral Sciences, I believe. During that time, again, we were still a department. Dr. Harrington was still our chair, and we continued to provide the Masters in Public Administration, undergraduate degrees in political science, administration of justice, health administration. For a time, we had Dr. Naomi Lede was doing some work with us with transportation. Eventually, that splintered off and went to another area of the university, and health administration splintered off and went into the School of Pharmacy. But the core of political science and administration of justice remained, and students pursuing the Masters in Public Administration. And students, even though students went over into health administration, they would still come back to us to take certain courses that were requirements for them. In political science in particular, we started to do some things in order to try and get to make sure that our students were able to do well on these exams that they have to take, these national exams, and that they could be competitive. And so it was during that time that courses were introduced, like Introduction to Political Science. That was made a requirement, and I tried to develop that class so that the students would have not only the basics of why study political science, but also research skills as well. And what we did was to study where our students were doing well and where they were not doing well. And just speaking for the political science unit, we started to add requirements like theory. We added the constitutional law requirement. We added the introduction to political science requirement. And we also added an international requirement. Because when we looked at those national exams, we saw that those were the areas where there was a lot of emphasis. So we knew we were working with them on American government, but we had to do more work with them in the other areas as well. We just, I don't know, we just tried to round it out so that they could do what they needed to do. And in addition to having a core of classes that the majors were required to take, we also required that people who minor in political science take that core of classes as well. And that was pretty much how we moved along. There was interaction between administration of justice and political science because some students majored in administration of justice but took political science as a minor. Others took political science as the major and then decided to take administration of justice as a minor. But political science students really minor in all kinds of things. Communication. I think the most unusual was a student, I think, who majored in physics or something and political science. They had another who majored in math and political science. So they just fix it up however they want to. But generally, they will take communications as a minor. They will take administration of justice as a minor. Some take psychology as a minor, sociology as a minor. Mostly, those are the areas that they remain in. Over time, a decision was made to return the School of Public Affairs, which is where we are now. The dean who was brought in at that time, Dr. Don Anthony Woods, was brought in to be the dean at that time. He served for some years, I don't know what, maybe 5 years or so as dean. And then Dr. Harrington took over as the dean. Dr. Woods was charged with, building the school, building it back into a school of public affairs. We brought people in and put them in charge of things like graduate studies and things like that. Also had someone, Melanie Dumas, who was put in charge of working with the students as far as advising them and things like that. So it was a kind of finding your way back into a school at that time. By the time Dr. Harrington took over as dean, what was happening during his tenure was that he, as I see it, was someone who understood not only what black institutions are supposed to be about, but also tried to implement that. And the thing that he encouraged was research, but he also encouraged teaching. And that's my forte, is teaching. So Dr. Harrington, we had some good years, some productive years during Dr. Harrington's tenure as dean. And eventually he decided to step down, and when he stepped down, we brought in the current dean, who is known as the father of environmental justice, Dr. Robert Bullard. And we are making some changes now. Dr. Bullard has laid out his template for social justice and equity as something that he wants us to move towards. So I don't really know where we're going to be, 40 years from now, but that's where we are now.
So let me ask, and I know you've given us a very good synopsis of the 40-year period, but are there any, maybe they aren't, but are there any other details of things that went on during, we'll call it the McCoy years, of those very early years between 1974 when it was designated as a school through, I guess it would be 1980 or so when he served as dean?
I can't really think of anything other than just trying to build a school. Actually putting the programs in place, because some things we had not had before, like a master's in public administration. So putting those new programs in place, trying to bring faculty people in who could work in those areas. But I can't think of anything other just said. I know it was a time when Dr. McCoy tried to bring in people who were well known in the field, eminent professors. Tried to bring in, tried to get he did get the Ralph Bunche Chair started, and tried to get a journal started, the Ralph Bunche Journal. Tried to get those things up and going. So I would, I'd say getting the Ralph Bunche Chair and trying to get the journal up and going. Those were two things that come to mind as things that had things worked out the way that they could have or should have. That would put us a little further ahead.
And during the Anderson years, I know we would call that being a bit of a lot of reorganizations where the school became a department in the School of Management, and then it was moved to the College of Arts and Sciences. And you talked about there not being at the most at ease feeling when during that time of the within the School of Management. Can you talk us through what else was going on during that time to make sure that you continue to prepare the students?
Well, we had faculty at that time who were inclined to work with students. So the one thing you do is you show up, and the other thing you do is you do your work. So the students, I don't think students were aware of things, but I don't know how aware they were, because I've talked to students since then, and it came up that there were all these big battles going on about should we have this program or that program or whatever, and they told me they didn't know anything about it, and I would just tell them, well, that's because your job was to go to school, and we were trying to keep all those things from you. So I think that there, of course, when you're making changes, you're going to have disagreements. But I think that the thing that I remember best, and maybe that's because that's what my interest is, but I remember that people kept showing up and they kept doing their work, and students felt comfortable to come around, and they did not. Some things students did get caught up in, but it was more along the lines of, say, if there was something going on at the state level, but it wasn't. There was never any kind of, say, big rebellion of any kind. A lot of student involvement in the kinds of activities that we were engaged in, just trying to keep the school going.
Now, the courses that you have helped to develop and have become really the staple of the curriculum here that I hear a lot about are of course, the urban politics and, of course, the constitutional law course that for students that are going on to law school have heard great things about it. Can you walk me through and preparing for that, as well as some of the students that you feel have gone on and what they've done?
Preparing for what now? Any of those courses?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I didn't actually bring constitutional law to the curriculum. It's more or less branded as my class now, but I didn't bring that class to the curriculum. But I did bring 6 classes to the curriculum, and the intent of those classes was, try to update and also to provide students with skills. For instance, the introduction to political science, that teaches you not, as I said earlier, not just about the discipline, but also how to collect information and conduct your research in the discipline. The issue of women is one that often is not dealt with to the satisfaction of women. So we started a seminar called Women's Political Issues so that we could, instead of being tied to a particular format, we did it as a seminar format. So if there were things that were happening that were especially important, we could bring that to the table. And interestingly, quite a few of the male students enrolled in the class. And some of them, I think, enrolled so they could collect a little information about women. But the one point I always made to them was, this is not about male bashing. It's not, you know, for guys who were just looking for 3 hours and they just felt, okay, maybe this will be an easy 3 hours. No, it won't be easy. But it's not about male bashing. It's about us, all of us. And if we can learn how to understand and communicate about what's going on with all of us, then we can work together a little better. And with urban politics, that's another issue that was in the forefront. America is becoming more and more urbanized. And so students need to know basic things like the structure of government, but they also need to know how to get things done, why things happen. So that course, I tried to develop it so that they would not only have the nuts and bolts information, but also so that they would go out and do assignments in the field to, you know, to not just know that there's something called city council, but to get some understanding of what city council really works like. The civil rights class, you know, it's not the 1960s anymore, but civil rights is still a big deal. So try to bring issues into that class that would enable students to understand that you have to work within, you have to understand the system that you're living within. And once you understand that, if you want to make changes, you can try, but you have to understand what you're working with. You have to not get caught up with whatever the flavor of the month is, you know, because the language changes. You know, it's Negro, it's colored, it's black, it's civil rights, it's black nationalism, it's integrationist thought. You have all these different notions that are out there. In the end, it's about the road to freedom. So you try to get students to understand what works best for them in that area. So try to develop some courses that would broaden students' understanding, strengthen them, and help them. I used to always tell them, learn how to think outside yourself. Help them to try to understand that you're not the only thing in this world that matters. When it comes to constitutional law, many students see political science as a major, as a gateway major to the law school. What I try to get them to understand is that law school and political science are not the same thing. And that even if you've had constitutional law at the undergraduate level, that doesn't make you a lawyer. It just means you know a few things. So with constitutional law, what I do is, first of all, try to get them to understand that it's an American government class. And if you go back and take a look at the things you studied in your basic introductory classes, you're studying the Congress, you're studying the president, you're studying about civil rights and those things, but you're studying it in a different way and in a much more detailed way. So what I do with the constitutional law class is I take them all the way back to 231. Well, it's changed now. It'll be 235 and 236. Take them back to the introductory classes, but take them back to those classes on a different level. It's not enough to just tell me that there is a president. You have to understand something about the constitutional basis of the presidency. What kinds of cases have expanded and also limited the power of the executive branch of government. if you're going to look at the branches of government, one of the things that they find interesting is when government fights itself, and the members of the Congress will take the president to court. They don't come in expecting that, because they expect the president and the Congress to be the decision makers. And so you see the government actually fighting itself. So you try to get them to understand that the government, the Constitution, is still a work in progress. So they learn how to brief cases, but they learn history. They learn about the relationships of the branches of government, and they learn how government makes decisions, in particular how a decision, not just by the Congress or the president, but by the courts as well, can shape your life in ways that you had never imagined.
Well, Professor Johnson, I just want to thank you for your time and your commitment to service here at Texas Southern and the School of Public Affairs. I would like to give you an opportunity to make some closing remarks, just to recap as we launch this 40th year celebration. Would you like to share some things with us?
Well, I guess the main thing that I would like people to remember is that they not only inherit history, they also create it. And you have, whether you want to have it or not, you have a responsibility to try to make this world the best place that you can. And when you can't help the history that you inherited, but you need to know your history, you need to understand your history. You don't have to live in the past, you just have to understand your past. Learn what you can from that, but at the same time, try to create a history that the next generation will be able to look back on. In other words, just legacy. I call it a bridge. A bridge called legacy is indestructible. It never ends. And at the risk of preaching, I say that Black institutions are sacred ground, because we will never know the names and the sacrifices that people made to make it possible for us to have these institutions. And in what is supposed to be a post-racial era, we see that race does still matter. I still think there's a place for these institutions, for people who are willing to work with the students and understand that their stresses may be different than your stresses. They obviously don't have the same stresses as people did during slavery, but the stresses that they have are very real to them. And don't diminish it, just understand it. And try to understand where you came from, understand about your race, your culture, and all of those things. And know that if you understand that this is sacred ground, then you should be humbled by that and be honored to be here and try to do the best that you can while you're here.
Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you quite a bit even in the future.
Okay, thank you.